What family secret was finally spilled in your family?
My uncles are infamous criminals who killed multiple people. I thought they bred dogs.
They may have also bred dogs.
After my mom died, I found out the real story behind my parents' marriage. She came to my father's country to visit some of her relatives. Met my father, and after just 1 week she asked him to marry her so she could stay in the country. My father accepted because he had knew Nelson his parents were pressing him to get married already. But the highlight of the story is that over some time, the two of them fell in love with each other. Their love only grew over the time and they were really happy together. My mother spent her last days very ill, and she would accept only my father by her bedside. He swears to this day that she was an angel sent from God to take care of him. I'm shocked that they got married just like that, out of the blue, and ended up loving each other so deeply. I can only hope to have as good and loving marriage as they had.
We found out after my grandfather died that none of his 7 children with my grandmother were his, and that they all likely had different fathers.
Were your grandparents old enough that this was a pre-sperm donation set of pregnancies? When I found out I was a donor kid, I also learned that helpful friends existed before modern sperm donation practices. And that husbands didn't usually know because it was believed it would destroy them to know they were infertile.
Sperm donation has been around a long time. Medical schools have been doing it since the 1920s. The donors were med students.
This is actually interesting and was definitely more common than people think. It is actually still something that happens to this day, when people cannot afford traditional infertility treatment or just don't want to go through it. I read an article recently about men who even donate their sperm for free outside of the system. They're happy to do it and don't mind helping people out. Of course, it introduces some complications because it's unregulated. Typically, there are limits on donors so that there aren't too many related people in one gene pool.
When I was 28, I found out that my dad was not my biological father. The news came out via the following: my dad was battling depression and was suicidal, so I had just flown home to try to take care of him and rescue him from my mom's wrath. My mom had verbally and emotionally abused him during their entire relationship. He loved her so much, and he tolerated it. Well, during a solemn walk with my dad, as I tried to help him out, he confided that he's not my biological dad. And he went on to tell me he knew this all along, but my mom lied to him and tried to convince him that he was my biological father. He knew he wasn't, but he wanted to play the role. When I was 10 years old, my mom finally confessed this to him, and he was worried that upon hearing the news, officially, he'd somehow let this affect his relationship with me. So, when I was 28 years old, during this walk with my dad, as he pours out this story to me, he frames it by telling me that his 2 most proud items in his life are how I turned out, his raising me. That he had completely forgot about the news my mom told him earlier in that day, about him not being my biological father. And that it was only upon tucking me in at night, that it briefly crossed his mind. It was at that point that he knew nothing would ever come between us and our father-son relationship would be as awesome as ever. He also confided that my mom did hard drugs while pregnant with me, and this broke his heart to witness firsthand. They were very poor. My dad grew up in a foster home without parents. My mom grew up with 6 siblings and ill-equipped parents. She dropped out of 9th grade, whereas all of her other siblings dropped out earlier. Many of them are barely literate. I'm now mid-30s, and tragically, my dad committed suicide mid-March 2020, right as COVID was hitting. I was out of the country at the time but immediately flew 30 hours and made it in time for his funeral. I do everything in his honor.
My mom and brother are not biologically related to me. My bio mom died sometime after I was born, leaving me, my sister, and my dad behind. My brother was the one that told me. My parents never told me because they wanted to protect me from the truth, but my brother thought that was a BS reason for me to not know. I don't know if my parents know that I know the truth, but I don't want to bring it up either.
I met my wife when my daughter was 16 months old. Bio dad was never in the picture. Once it was looking like a relationship that would last. We got married and briefly toyed with the idea of just never telling her. She was around 3-4 at this time. Ultimately, we decided that it would be better to not hide it, though that has created some issues with her now half-siblings and some self-esteem issues. I just felt that her potentially finding this out as an adult might be pretty traumatizing and messed up. It's a pretty big lie of omission, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. Also as important, I believe, for medical history-related things she'll encounter later in life. Lastly, it gives Bio Dad the chance to do an about-face and get to know his daughter without the massive trauma of an unspoken lie being brought into play. To ease into it, at around 4 years old, I started saying things to her like "after I met you and mommy," and this insert situation happened before I met you and mommy. She was able to put 2 and 2 together as time progressed, so it wouldn't have to be a sit-down confession, but rather a more evolutionary realization which we guided her through. After I was molested by my uncle, it came out he had done this to another one of my sisters, and my family covered it up, particularly my mother. Now I know why my sister didn't like how close my uncle got to me when I was younger. It's never just one victim, which is why it's especially terrible to cover it up. This person isn't lying. I came out to my mom after the fact that a family friend had molested me and a brother of mine, and it turns out that he had did this to 4 to 5 children including me. So if you've been molested, I encourage you to tell someone, because it's not just your sanity and safety at stake, but chances are it's someone close to you as well.
My niece is dealing with a situation involving her 7-year-old daughter. My niece mentioned to her daughter's therapist about her concerns about her daughter having inappropriate interest in sex and her bizarre behavior when her daughter returns from visits at her dad's house. DCYF is investigating. My niece's daughter isn't allowed to see her dad. Her daughter's dad is pissed and of course pointing fingers at everyone else and telling flat-out lies that are being disproved. Currently this piece of rubbish got into a hit-and-run accident, but the pictures I saw of the car, it's completely totaled. Yeah, I find it hard to believe it was a hit-and-run. I think he tried to commit suicide. Also, for a little background, my niece and this guy lived with me when my niece was pregnant. He hit on and hung out with 14-year-old girls when my niece was at school. One of the girls he hung out with told my niece last year that he raped her during that time period. I told my niece to see if this girl would be willing to talk to the cops or DCYF, because WTF. My niece is so overwhelmed and just holding it all in so her daughter doesn't feel like it's her fault. This situation sucks and breaks my heart, but my niece is strong and being a rock star mom to protect her little girl.
Do you have any experiences similar to this? Please share it down in the comments below. Also, if you like this topic and want more videos like this, please let me know by hitting the like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.